Hello and welcome to Serious Insights for Admins. I'm your host, Kristi Campbell, and I'm joined today by Michael Kolodner, the independent consultant at kolodner.com. Hello, Michael.
Hello, Kristi. So good to be here. So good to see you.
Michael is a Master of Things nonprofit, and I wanted to bring him here today to talk to us about Nonprofit Cloud. So, Michael, give me some background as to how you ended up becoming an independent consultant working on Nonprofit Cloud.
Well, I'm an accidental admin, an accidental consultant. I'm an accidental everything. My first job after being a stay-at-home dad for 10 years, I was working at a community organizing job, and we needed CRM. And I went out and researched the options, and I thought, this Salesforce thing looks good. It's free. We can talk about that in a bit. And so we implemented with the help of a consultant, and I had been kind of running away from databases my whole career and volunteering. And so when I started playing with Salesforce, I was excited because it made sense to me. I could make it do what I wanted, and I got really interested in doing more. So after a couple years trying to do more at that job, I decided I wanted a full-time Salesforce job and got one at a medium-sized nonprofit called Spark, which gave me the opportunity to really get involved in the Salesforce community. And in 2020, at the beginning of the pandemic, when my job at Spark ceased to exist, I became a full-time independent consultant.
Awesome. So taking that passion to help others. I love it.
Exactly.
My main exposure to Nonprofit Cloud is that I attend my local nonprofit user group. And I mean, of course, I like free lunch, but also I argue that a lot of the fundamentals are the same, right? So a lot of the things that we're talking about in terms of trouble building formulas or flows or, those reports, those kinds of things are similar. But I do want to kind of talk through some of the use cases or kind of unique pieces that nonprofits face in terms of what they have to track. Because my main exposure, I've contributed, right? So as a donor, but I know there's a lot more that nonprofits track. So just in again, not a typical anything, right? But what kind of things are unique that nonprofits are trying to track that a for-profit business might not track?
So I think that's why I love working in the nonprofit world. So what makes the nonprofit sort of special is every nonprofit is unique. I mean, of course, every business is unique, but the common challenges across nonprofits are mostly focused on people. Nonprofits have stakeholders and donors and clients, but they don't necessarily have customers, although some, of course, have some products that they sell and get earned revenue. So what I find really interesting with Salesforce is taking this platform that's designed for business, but designed to be so flexible, and customizing it to be uniquely suited for any nonprofit doing their work in the world. There's the Nonprofit Success Pack, which Salesforce.org publishes, which of course takes Salesforce, overlays the NPSP on top of it, and makes Salesforce suitable for fundraising. That's what the Nonprofit Success Pack is focused on. So first of all, changes the Salesforce data model rather than being that sales data model where every contact is part of an account, that is to say their employer. The Nonprofit Success Pack switches it so that every contact is part of a household. So if you create Michael Kolodner as a new contact in your Salesforce instance, you will get automatically the Kolodner household, where you would also put, say, my wife and my children, and so that my donations came from me and my household. And if the place where I work also should make a contribution, we can capture that as separate money from my money. We can talk about soft credits later if you want, but we can link that donation to the organization that gave the money or the household that gave the money and the people that influenced that money.
Okay, and we can talk. Yeah, NPSP I know is kind of the core of the first thing I think about. I know there's some other things we can talk about too, but you mentioned the free licenses, and I want to make sure that we start from there, right? So, as a certified nonprofit, right, you get an an enterprise, I'm just saying these words and I know you'll correct me if I'm wrong. I think you get an enterprise org, which I think is really nice. It's not like that you're getting the cheapest tier, right? You're getting an enterprise org, which gives you a lot more robust, limits and features, with 10 licenses of Sales and Service Cloud.
They are Sales and Service Cloud licenses. So you're getting an enterprise org. So you're getting the same thing that a Fortune 500 company might purchase. I mean, some might get unlimited edition, but we'll stick with enterprise, which is what most people use. You're getting 10 free licenses in perpetuity. In United States terms, all you need to do is basically waive your 501c3 certification that proves you are a charitable organization. In international organizations can get it as well, but of course different. Tax or organizational documentation.
And so then you've got this brand new, fresh baby little org.
Fresh org.
Do you think most nonprofits start with NPSP, or I guess there's always that build versus buy question, right? With these industry clouds or specific clouds. So is it more typical that people are starting with NPSP, especially like you mentioned, just the sheer householding model? I think most would want to.
In my experience, most nonprofits go with NPSP, even if they're not planning to use Salesforce to track donations, either because they're not donation driven or they have another donation database and they're not moving that. They want to do program management on Salesforce, which is what I love to build for my customers primarily. Most tend to choose Nonprofit Success Pack because you get that household account model, which is more how nonprofits think of their constituents. But other than that, you really have your sort of clean slate Salesforce instance, and you can do whatever you want. There are other modules that Salesforce.org offers, including Nonprofit Cloud Case Management, Salesforce.org Elevate, which is a donation processing, credit card processing platform, the program management module, and some others. You can layer those on, or you can build custom to do exactly what you want and name things exactly how you want them. And the Nonprofit Success Pack is not going to get in your way. It's really going to touch the household account model. And when you install the Nonprofit Success Pack, you get some opportunity record types, and you get a payments object. If you want to do multiple payments on an opportunity, that's built into the Nonprofit Success Pack. But you don't have to use that stuff.
Say that 10 times fast.
Yeah, exactly. It used to be called the Nonprofit Starter Pack. And
I knew it was something else.
People still think that.
I remember the transit. It was one of those classic to lightning things that it's the same letter, so it was like, oh, this is going to take so long, and now we're like, what was the other S that
right, what was it? I was like, wait, it was the Nonprofit Starter Pack.
Right.
And like you said, organizations get the 10 licenses, which is an amazing discount. They get future licenses at about 80% off without having to negotiate any sort of a discount, which is huge. It means that nonprofits are getting the same technology that the largest companies in the world use, and they're getting it either for free or at extremely low cost. But I do have a blog about the fact that free isn't always free, right? Salesforce is free like a puppy, not free like a beer for nonprofits.
Right.
You are going to have to put some resources into learning the system, customizing the system, possibly hiring a consultant like me to help you implement and really get the most out of it. But I think that it is a worthwhile endeavor because what you get is so valuable beyond what you're going to put in those resources.
Yeah, I do think it's tough. My impression is, that I think my nonprofit default assumption, right, is kind of like a scrappy, doing the best we can kind of vibe. And so I definitely think that translates to the metaphor people say of like buying Salesforce is like buying a Ferrari and you don't want to just drive it to the grocery store, right? Like you could get your free seats and you could dump in messy data just like you've had in your spreadsheets and put them in Salesforce, and that's not really going to give you an advantage. But one thing that kind of stands out from what we've talked about so far is there is definitely an understanding piece around the things that go into the nonprofit world, that not every admin can just jump into, into one of these orgs, right? So the idea of volunteering with a nonprofit to learn isn't, I know it's a loaded gun, which is why I wanted to talk about it, but it's interesting to me because it's they need guidance too, right? They're getting a new system. They need confident guidance, not, volunteering is of course a facet, and there's certain things, data entry things that sure someone that didn't have as much Salesforce knowledge could help with. But even if you're a brand new admin and you do feel like you have the skills enough to be helpful and not hurtful, it's still a whole different data. I mean, not a whole different data model, but there's
industry knowledge and expertise,
right? Just like anything else.
Absolutely.
And I do think certainly Salesforce, like I said, I go to the nonprofit user group meetings. There's skills that translate if you're doing real estate versus software versus a nonprofit, right? There's things that translate, but there's also things that don't. And so you do kind of end up with some specificity to really understand, for example, should I use the program management module from Salesforce, or should I build something myself, right? And knowing kind of the background of those things to set them up for success.
Absolutely. It has gotten less in the last few years, but there used to be a lot of talk about, before you get your first Salesforce job, if you want to be able to demonstrate that you have Salesforce skills, volunteer for your local nonprofit and build them out Salesforce or work with their Salesforce. And many of us on the nonprofit side, I was a customer at the time. I was at a small nonprofit, would push back hard on that idea. Volunteers are wonderful and nonprofits thrive with volunteers, but you have to know what you're doing. It's not like showing up to do a garden cleanup and knowing how to wield a shovel. Most of us can figure that out. It's more like showing up to a Habitat for Humanity build and then trying to do plumbing. No, you can show up to Habitat for Humanity and you can probably swing a hammer.
Yep.
But you're probably not going to install the furnace or the garbage disposal unless you have some clue. Well, it's the same with Salesforce. A flow is a flow, a formula is a formula. If a nonprofit has a particular need that they could identify, you can probably do a little bit of a pro bono project for them. But if you just show up without much experience of your own in Salesforce, first of all, or in nonprofits as an industry and how nonprofits work, accounting is slightly different. Who constituents are is thought of differently. Terminology is different. And so you can definitely break things. And then someone like me is going to have to get paid to fix them, which is great for my career, but not so great for the nonprofits that I support.
Well, it doesn't leave them with a good sense that, this is the right tool, right? That they went the right direction with, probably making a change that was a big deal, that you want it to go well if it can.
Exactly.
So Salesforce isn't thought of as a curse word.
Exactly. For sure.
Yes, I remember going to Habitat for Humanity and painting, and then painting walls, and then the next day I couldn't lift my arms because they were just.
And I've been on volunteer painting things where I thought to myself, someone's repainting this tomorrow because nobody knew what they were doing, or there's just there's drips all over the floor, and you're thinking this. This school that was like, yay, we're going to get our walls and our lockers refreshed, is now thinking this looks like a total mess, and I guess we're going to have to spend 12 hours cleaning the school before the students come back.
It is a really interesting difference, I think, around nonprofits, though, around the balance of efficiency versus time to throw at it. For example, again, with Habitat, I hand nailed in subflooring, which means A, I couldn't feel my thumb, but B, if you think about it, having 10 people do that, there's only so much damage you can do. One guy with a nail gun probably could have done it, but
not if they didn't know what they were doing.
But there's so there's the balance, right? The one guy with the nail gun maybe can be doing something I can't do, and anyway, this analogy has played itself out clearly, but this makes me want to go back and volunteer at Habitat. It's been a while. You mentioned program management as one of your favorite things, and I wanted to dig into this a little bit because one of the things that I think it's something that I hadn't really thought about as much from the nonprofit side, and I am proud. That's not the right word that I want. I am. I can't even speak my words. I have a friend, Jen Lang, who's wonderful, who is the Salesforce admin at Crisis Assistance Ministry, which is local here in Charlotte, giving a hand up and assistance with bills that need to be paid if your electricity's about to get shut off, etc. They also have a free store where people can qualify to shop for household items and clothes for interviews and things like that. And so it's always really interesting to me. We were talking about the program management in terms of those programs, right? Getting someone to sign up to come to the store, or somebody requesting to have a bill paid. And not only is it tracking, I am Sally and I have requested these things, but also that some of the money that they get for certain things, they have to show that those things are what they did with the money, right? So there's and then even you mentioned with like matching and those like specific programs might be part of a specific company's thing, right? So can you just dive into a little bit more about that, about like what program management means, really?
Sure, and that you've already started to illustrate, right? So Salesforce.org has what's called the program management module, which is meant to give a baseline for nonprofits to manage their programs on Salesforce. But at the same time, many, probably most, I mean, I haven't done a survey, but I'm pretty confident it would be most nonprofits that are using Salesforce to do their program management on the platform have built custom, because their program is different than any other organization out there. How they want to interact, contacts who might be donors and or recipients or clients or whatever, how they're going to interact with the other pieces of the program. I work with lots of educational organizations. They could choose to be on EDA, the Education Data Architecture, or they could use Nonprofit Success Pack. My clients, actually all of my clients, have chosen to use Nonprofit Success Pack. Partly that's because I've recommended that, but it's partly because they also have donors, so they're doing the donation piece. And EDA, much of its architecture is focused around schools, and I'm working with supplemental education organizations, so they were going to probably be building custom things anyway because their program runs in a particular way. You could use the program management module, in which case you are going to customize the PMM to work your way, or you could build custom objects and relationships and flows and automation to work your way. But what it comes down to is you do business as a nonprofit in a very specific way, and so you're going to build the platform to work your way. And that's the same, I don't work in the for-profit world, but that's my understanding of how it works in the for-profit world as well.
Sure.
If you have sales, you may use quote-unquote Sales Cloud, more or less exactly how it works out of the box. If you have customer support, you may use Service Cloud, more or less directly how it works out of the box. But the minute you start wanting to manage something that your business does on the platform, you're going to start deciding, do I build or buy? Do I install an App Exchange app? Do I customize? Or is there something that works similarly that I can use? Do I add a cloud like Commerce Cloud to manage my sales? Or do I simply build my own custom inventory management system or something like that?
So the programs are the things that you offer that you need to sign people up
what you're doing
for, or okay.
I would say I would define program management, or what nonprofits do as program management, as what do they do. So if you're a organization that offers after school tutoring for kids, that's your program, and you need to manage it. That is to say, know which kids are signed up and which tutor they're working with and whatnot on Salesforce. Okay,
so then with the idea of habitat, right, is it that like each house is a program record, and then like are there like sub things of like each date that people are coming to volunteer?
So you asked at least two questions there, and I'm going to say the answer is yes, right? Maybe. I mean, I haven't worked with a Habitat for Humanity chapter, but I would expect, of course, the family that has applied for a house is, of course, they're going to be a contact in a household or something like that. The house or the address might be a record. There might be an object to store those. You're going to need some sort of junction between the family that's going to live in the house and the house itself. You're also going to need volunteers. So maybe you'll use a product like Volunteers for Salesforce, published by salesforce.org, to manage who is signing up for which day to do which tasks for how long, etc. And maybe you would, let's use the Habitat example, maybe you add a custom field that could relate a volunteer event to a particular house. And so in the end, you would have reportability on things like how many volunteer hours went into this particular house and who volunteered to build this particular house.
Okay. And then that sort of makes me get back to soft credits, and I don't want to get too far into it, but I think it's interesting. So the way it was explained to me, what again with this idea of a household, right? I'm the head of my household, and but I have a boyfriend. I don't have kids, but I could. And I work at Cirrus Insight, and I, volunteer at Crisis or whatever. And so the referral piece was what was interesting to me, right? Like, so that, my donations benefit my household or are credited to my household as a whole. Sure. But then I guess what are some of the other kind of connections that maybe people don't think about in terms of credits and referrals?
Sure. And this is a complicated topic, and I'll plug my blog here. So I actually have a blog post on freelikeapuppy.tech where I talk about soft credits and hard credits. But what it comes down to is one of the things fundraising organizations try to track is, right, how much their donors have given. So, and we talk about the difference between hard credit, which is my money that I gave, and soft credit, which is someone else's money that I have influenced the giving of. So if I have solicited, my friend to give $1,000 to the organization, that's not my money. I didn't give $1,000, but I have caused $1,000 to be donated. So I'm going to get soft credit for that $1,000, and we need a way to track that. And the Nonprofit Success Pack does that using contact roles. And so we would give me a contact role on the opportunity from my friend who gave $1,000 as solicitor or influencer or whatever the role might be. And then the Nonprofit Success Pack also does roll-ups to tally my hard credit donations and then those soft credits that I have influenced. And actually the Nonprofit Success Pack has a whole architecture for what they call customizable roll-ups to track the hard credit and the difference with soft credits, etc.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting because I think out of the, my brain thinks, okay, the highest donors are the people that they, quote unquote, care about most, right? Or are certain donation levels. But the referral piece and the influencer piece is a lot of it too, right? If you get 10 of your friends to buy seats at a table at an event, even if you don't buy one, like you're an influencer, right? You're having a large impact, even if it's not your money, right?
Absolutely. So, and board members are often, usually a nonprofit would like a board member to support that nonprofit at the level that they can. But many boards have a give or get goal. And so if you can give the amount, fine, great. And hopefully you give to the organization you're on the board of as one of your, highest supported organizations. But, you can also meet that goal by getting your friends to make those donations. And so we need to track who made their give or get goal and who is someone who really can bring in those dollars, even if they're not just writing a giant check themselves.
And providing receipts for those things.
Yep.
And
tax receipts are important, and the distinction between that hard credit that you can deduct from your taxes and the soft credit that you can't is important.
One thing that we didn't end up touching on that you've mentioned is Salesforce.org, and I just wanted to clarify or ask you to clarify a little bit about, right, like they used to be different, but now they're not, and kind of how that has impacted all of this, I guess.
Sure. And I'm
Right.
not an expert.
Our
and I haven't
third-party
seen an org chart.
impressions.
Yeah, exactly. My impression from the outside. So Salesforce.org was an independent organization, and they, among other things, they managed the P10 grants, the Power of Us grant program, where nonprofits get their 10 licenses. They also published the Nonprofit Success Pack and the Education Data Architecture and other tools. And in, I think it's 2020 or maybe it's 2019, it was announced that Salesforce.org would come fully internal to Salesforce.com. And so Salesforce.org is now, I don't actually know if the .org is part of their name anymore or if it's Nonprofit Cloud. Anyway,
Right.
They are, another business line within Salesforce, which, everything has its pluses and minuses. There is people are now part of a bigger organization. We have already seen some instances where that means more resources or better connections, where more people within the .com side of Salesforce know what's happening, are going to join things like the open source sprints. And at the same time, there's also things that have changed. So there used to be an entire community for the Power of Us
Separate.
Hub was a community of nonprofit Salesforce practitioners. And that was folded into the Trailblazer community, which has pluses and minuses. I think it has resulted in a slight loss of engagement in that specific nonprofit space. But hopefully it also gives us access to more expertise, more people, more chances for new people coming into the ecosystem to learn what nonprofits do.
Yeah, and actually, I'm happy you mentioned sprints because I feel like that's also an interesting way to potentially get involved or dip your toe in or kind of see what things are about. If you have some nonprofit background, maybe, and you're getting started, or maybe even not.
I would say, yeah, interestingly, whereas I say, volunteering for a nonprofit and touching their sales, being given, admin perms to their Salesforce instance scares me. Anyone can come to a sprint. So let me quickly explain what sprints are. So the open source sprints are this very unique event where people come together, generate ideas for resources, products, apps, documentation, whatever would be useful to nonprofits to elevate their Salesforce success. And then we sit down and we try to build it. So there are sprint teams that have built actual apps. For example, the Summit Events app is an app that helps you manage events for your nonprofit on Salesforce, so registration and things like that. That's an app published through the App Store. Then there's been other sprint projects where somebody said, we really need good documentation about how addresses work in the Nonprofit Success Pack because there's the ability to have summer addresses and temporary seasonal addresses. And so we sat down and we wrote documentation and published it obviously on the Salesforce.org website. There's an entire team. I don't remember what they call themselves now. They used to be called the NPSP videography team that makes short videos introducing how to use or customize a Nonprofit Success Pack or other .org feature. They're amazing. They have, like dozens and dozens, if not 100 or more videos at this point, professionally produced, voice talent sourced from the community at sprints. And before the pandemic and starting again in November, these are live events, in-person events. We come together for 2 days. We come up with ideas. We sit down and we work on them for 2 days and then hopefully continue to work on them in between and then come back together at the next sprint. There will actually be a sprint at Dreamforce on the Thursday of Dreamforce. That's a first ever, and we'll see how that goes. I'm sure a lot of people, including myself, will be popping in and out to do other Dreamforce things during the day, but it will be an opportunity for nonprofit people at Dreamforce to come together.
Connect.
And there's one in November.
Interesting. I really like the idea of, we talked about we're not all that different, right? And that you can express that they've created a space for expressing the things that you need and then working to build them, and to like, because sometimes it really just takes focus, and it can be tough to, okay, I do need a registration management tool, and just to kind of think about how that might benefit others. And
to use our Habitat for Humanity example, I think sprints are the opportunity where anyone can come and swing a hammer.
Okay.
We need people who, are interested in one project or another, who can read a draft of documentation, who know nothing about the feature, and tell me whether or not I captured how to do this thing. We need people to test a new app, test the installation of the app, test the customization of the app. Does it do what we think it does? We need people who can help spec it out. If you work for a nonprofit and you do a particular thing, we want to hear your use case, and maybe you'll bounce ideas off someone else who has a similar but slightly different use case. Mm-hmm. So we really do need people at all levels. People who've barely touched Salesforce have come to sprints. We've had organizations send people to sprints who are considering adopting Salesforce, and they're able to contribute because they can say, well, this is what I'm hoping it will do for my organization. And we can say, we should probably build that.
Awesome. I love it. Obviously, there's tracks about Nonprofit Cloud on Trailhead. In terms of the sprints, what's the best way to get more information about?
I wish I knew the exact group, but if you go on the Trailblazer community and search for the Nonprofit Hub, which is sort of the entrance way for nonprofits to the Trailblazer community, you can find the groups that are under the Nonprofit Hub there, and you should find the sprint group or a sprint group, or most of the groups. You will see when there's a post about the next sprint upcoming and chances to register, etc.
Okay.
The next one upcoming is November 3rd and 4th, or 2nd and 3rd. I can't remember which one, but if you search for the registration for that, that one's going to be in San Francisco at the Salesforce Tower.
Ooh.
Yeah, so that should be kind of fun.
The Open Source Commons sprint.
Open Source Commons.
Those are all the keywords for search.
Exactly.
I love it. I think this has really helped me understand better what the capabilities are with Nonprofit Cloud. So I super appreciate your insight. We like to wrap up with an idea, maybe when you've taken an ad minute for yourself, something that you read or saw recently that you wanted to share with our listeners.
So can I do two this time?
Yeah,
okay.
Sure.
So my ad minute this week, I've been playing with the agenda builder for Dreamforce because, so I'll tell you my strategy. I just bookmark all the things and I wing it. I mean, if there's something for sure I know I want to go to, then obviously I'm going to try to, make time and make that happen. I'm going to true to the core, come hell or high water. But other than that, I just bookmark a ton of things, and then wherever I find myself at the time, I can look down at my agenda on my phone and see what's nearby and decide I'm not walking, a 10-minute race across San Francisco. I think it'll be a little more compact this year, but still. So that's my, what I've been doing most recently is playing with the agenda builder. But I also had a really interesting light bulb moment when I was listening to a marketplace tech podcast while biking the other day, and they were talking about the algorithm that allocates kidneys for kidney transplant. And they were talking about how the people building the algorithm, which was based off of decades of work where a human committee helps allocate fairly, and the committee has representation that's diverse. The builders of now that they have a computerized system, they said, well, we could go out to 4 or 5 significant digits for any of these sort of averages to compare two metrics, but that's not going to mean anything. We should talk about how many digits we want to go, because if you're comparing two people and they're different by 0.00001 of their relative merit for getting a transplant, that's probably not significant. And it made me think, well, there's plenty of times in my Salesforce where I create a new formula field or number field, and I just say, oh, well, I'm going to round to 2 digits or 3 digits. And thinking, is it really significant to round to 2 digits? Or should I just round up to the next whole number, and so that more things do sort together and a human has to apply judgment as to whether they're actually any different?
I like it. I think most fields, I think about currency, I think is why our default is 2, but that's a really, I'm going to go read that. We will link it in the show notes. Mine was also kind of a thinker. I read a Medium article, and forgive me if I say this wrong, by Suraj Pillai, why Salesforce needs to take a step back with flows. And I don't know that I fully agree with the idea, but it is interesting to think about, when we were getting started as accidental admins and you have workflow, and that workflow rules feels like an entry level admin tool, right? And you can't create loops, right? There's only so much damage, I guess, you can do. And so that by committing to flows, that's more of an advanced process automation tool. And so, especially with the idea of recently with Salesforce Easy, right? Is there a structure of flows easy that can be a starting point for admins to truly get started and not have the only option be this intermediate to advanced kind of option. So it's good thinker.
It's a good thinker.
I'm sure that they've thought about those kinds of things, but I definitely feel like you see new admins that flow is hard because it's hard, so.
And it's hard to remember that if you're doing a really simple thing, flow might not be that hard, but you immediately are presented with the canvas and you can do anything.
Right. Get dangerous.
Yeah, it can get dangerous fast.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for your time today, and thank you everyone for tuning in to Serious Insights.
Thank you, Kristi.
All right, we're gonna